It starts with a look. Not the kind that's angry or mean, but the kind that's just tired. You're saying something you care about, explaining an idea, feeling an emotion deeply, and you see their eyes glaze over for just a second, or they give that small, tight smile that says, "We're still doing this?" And in that moment, something in you folds. A voice whispers, quiet but certain, "You're doing it again. You're being too much." You learn to watch for it, the slight lean away, the pause that's a beat too long before they respond, the way a group conversation moves on without you, like a river flowing around a stone. You start editing yourself before you even open your mouth, running a preemptive filter over every thought, checking for intensity, for need, for anything that might make someone back away. And the worst part isn't even the rejection, it's the exhaustion of having to be smaller, of holding yourself in a permanent crouch just to make sure you don't take up too much space. This isn't a feeling that arrives with a bang. It builds slowly, over years, through 1,000 tiny moments. You share something vulnerable, and the other person changes the subject. You get excited about a passion, and someone calls you a lot. You express a need, and you're told you're too sensitive. After a while, you start to believe that your natural volume, your natural presence is fundamentally a problem, that love, acceptance, and connection are available to you, but only on the condition that you turn yourself down. So you become a master of accommodation. You become the listener, not the sharer, the one who asks questions so you don't have to answer any. You learn to match the energy of whoever you're with, to mirror them so perfectly that they never have to meet you. And for a while, it works. People tell you you're easy to be around. They say you're calm, that you're low maintenance, and you feel a strange, hollow pride in this. You've done it. You've successfully hidden the parts of you that felt unlovable. But the cost is that you start to feel invisible, because you're not actually connecting. You're performing a version of yourself that was designed to be acceptable, and the real you, the one with the big feelings, the deep thoughts, the enthusiastic rants, is living in solitary confinement. You begin to wonder if anyone would even like that person. You're not sure you do anymore. If this resonates, the first thing to understand is that this pattern is not a sign of brokenness. It is a sophisticated, deeply intelligent adaptation. Your brain learned at some point that full expression led to a painful outcome, withdrawal, criticism, abandonment. So it built a system to prevent that outcome. It didn't decide you were too much because you are too much. It decided that being smaller was the safest way to stay connected.
To understand why this feels so automatic, we have to look at the brain's most fundamental operating system, the attachment system. From the moment we're born, our primary survival strategy is proximity to caregivers. The infant brain doesn't know it can survive alone. It knows only that connection equals safety and disconnection equals danger. So it becomes exquisitely tuned to the cues of the attachment figure. What makes them stay? What makes them pull away? This system doesn't turn off when you grow up. It gets layered with more complex social dynamics, but the core mechanism remains. Your brain is constantly, unconsciously scanning for signs of social threat, rejection, exclusion, or disapproval. And when it detects even a hint of that threat, it activates a response. For some, that response is to fight, to get louder, to demand attention. But for those of us who learned that our intensity caused others to retreat, the response is to fawn or to freeze, to become smaller, to soothe the other person by erasing yourself. Think of it like a thermostat that was set too sensitively in childhood. It's not that the temperature is actually dangerous, it's that the alarm was calibrated to go off at the slightest hint of coolness from another person. So now, as an adult, you feel a spike of panic when someone doesn't text back quickly, or when you sense a shift in their tone. Your brain isn't responding to the present moment, it's responding to a memory, a time when someone's withdrawal really did mean danger. And it's activating the same survival strategy. Make yourself non-threatening. Make yourself small. There's a metaphor that captures this perfectly. Imagine you're a radio tower broadcasting your signal out into the world. Your signal is your personality, your emotions, your needs, your full frequency. When you were young, you broadcast your signal, and instead of hearing it, the people around you said, "Turn that down, it's too loud." So you learned to lower the volume. Then you lowered it again. Eventually, you learned to broadcast on a frequency you thought others would tolerate, not your own. The problem is, when you broadcast on the wrong frequency for too long, two things happen. First, you stop attracting people who resonate with your actual signal. You attract people who like the quiet, edited version. And second, you start to believe that your original signal doesn't exist anymore. You forget what it felt like to broadcast at full power. So how do you find your way back? Not by forcing yourself to be louder, which will only feel like a performance, but by understanding the psychological mechanism that's keeping you small and gently, patiently recalibrating it. The first step is to separate discernment from self-rejection. When you feel the urge to shrink yourself, pause and ask a simple question. Am I adjusting my behavior to honor the context or to punish myself for existing? This distinction matters because your brain is currently treating every moment of social adjustment as evidence that you're fundamentally flawed.
In reality, discernment is a neutral skill. You might speak differently to a child than to a colleague. That's discernment. But when you mute a passion because you're afraid of being called weird, that's self-rejection. The brain needs you to draw this line, because as long as every social edit feels like a betrayal of yourself, you'll continue to live in a state of internal conflict. You'll feel both desperate to be seen and terrified to be visible. Why this works in the brain? Every time you make a choice to shrink from a place of fear, you reinforce the neural pathway that says expression is dangerous. But when you make a choice from discernment, a calm, intentional decision about how and with whom to share, you start building a new pathway, one that separates your worth from your behavior. You're teaching your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, that not all social adjustments are a threat to your safety. Some are just choices. The second step is to practice broadcasting on your own frequency in low-stakes environments. Your brain has learned that your full signal is unsafe, so you need to create evidence to the contrary. But you don't start with the person who scares you the most. You start with the journal, with the voice memo you record and never send, with the solitary walk where you let your mind go wherever it wants. You practice being fully yourself when no one is watching. Because the neurological truth is that your brain doesn't fully distinguish between being seen and seeing yourself. When you give yourself permission to think freely, to feel deeply, to rant about your niche interest to your empty car, you are showing your brain that this frequency is safe. You are rebuilding the signal from the inside. The real-life example looks like this. Instead of editing your thoughts before they even form, you let them form fully in your own mind. You let yourself have the unfiltered reaction. You let yourself imagine saying exactly what you think to no one, just to feel what it's like to not turn the volume down. Over time, this practice starts to shift the baseline. Your brain begins to associate your natural intensity with safety again, not with danger. The third step is to conduct what psychologists call a reality test on your assumptions about being too much. This is where behavioral science meets the stories you've been telling yourself. When you feel that familiar pang, "I'm overwhelming them," your brain is making a prediction based on past data. But that data is old. It's from a time when you were less resourced, when the people around you may not have been capable of meeting you. So the practice is to gently ask, what is the actual evidence in this moment? Not the fear, not the story, the evidence. In practice, this means noticing someone's discomfort and your assumption of their discomfort. Maybe you shared something heartfelt and they didn't respond the way you hoped. Your brain instantly translates that into, "I am too much." But the reality could be that they were distracted or tired or simply didn't have the emotional capacity in that moment. None of those possibilities mean you were wrong to share. By asking for evidence, you interrupt the automatic loop. You give your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, a chance to weigh in before the fear-based amygdala hijacks the experience. The fourth step is to allow for mismatches. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive and the most liberating. The fear of being too much is ultimately a fear of being mismatched. You fear that your intensity, your depth, your need for connection will not align with what the other person can offer. And so you try to prevent the mismatch by erasing the part of you that might cause it. But the truth is, mismatches are inevitable. They are not evidence of your flaw, they are evidence of human difference. Your brain is wired to interpret a mismatch as a threat to belonging, but you can retrain it to see mismatches as neutral information. When you share something vulnerable and the other person changes the subject, that doesn't mean you are too much. It means they are not available for that kind of conversation right now. When you get excited about a passion and someone calls you intense, that doesn't mean your passion is wrong. It means they have a different comfort level with enthusiasm. The mismatch is not a verdict on your worth. It's simply a data point about compatibility. The real-life practice here is to stop finishing the sentence for them. When you feel a mismatch, don't immediately supply the conclusion, and therefore I am a problem. Instead, let it be incomplete. Let it just be, they didn't match my energy. Period. No further story required. Over time, this simple act of leaving the mismatch incomplete weakens the old neural link between disconnect and I am too much. The fifth step is to find or build a space where your full signal is welcome. This is not about finding one perfect person who validates everything you do. It's about creating enough pockets of resonance that your brain starts to internalize a new truth. My frequency is not inherently a problem. It's just not for everyone. And that's okay, because the goal is not to be universally accepted. The goal is to stop rejecting yourself preemptively on behalf of a world that never asked you to do it. When you have even one or two relationships where you can say, I'm feeling a lot right now, and the response is not retreat, but tell me more, your brain begins to update its model. It starts to see that expression can lead to deepening, not loss. And those experiences, even if they're small, act as anchors. They give your nervous system a new reference point. Now, bring all of this together into a single mental model. Picture a dimmer switch instead of an on-off switch. For so long, you've operated as if you have only two settings, full volume, which is dangerous, or off, which is safe. But you're not a light that needs to be either fully on or completely off. You're a dimmer, and the skill you're building is the ability to move the dial with intention, not fear, to know when to turn up, when to turn down, and to trust that you are the one making the choice. The dimmer belongs to you. When you live in the dimmer, you stop asking, am I too much? And start asking, what's the right amount for this moment, for this person, for myself? And the difference is everything. One question is a verdict, the other is a conversation. So, if you recognize yourself in this, let this be the moment you stop apologizing for your signal, not by turning it up in defiance, but by realizing it was never broken. The parts of you that feel the most, the ones that care deeply, think endlessly, and feel the texture of every moment, those are not flaws in the design. They are the design. They were just calibrated in an environment that couldn't hold them, but you can hold them now. And when you do, you'll find that the people who are meant to hear your frequency won't ask you to turn it down. They'll just lean in a little closer.